Amen, everybody. Welcome to our long-awaited series, Fixer Upper, the Marriage Project. Amen. I'd like to welcome those that are here live for coming and the millions that are watching on TV, your computer, or the telephone right now. We're glad that you're here, and I believe that if you invest in these next 8 weeks, that you will reap what you have sowed, that you will get something out of it, and that's why we're here. Quite often when people come to me and to talk to me about their marriage, they'll look at me at one point, and the first time we get together, they'll say, "Oh, but Pastor Tom, you don't understand. Our marriage is dead. Our marriage is dead. There's no hope whatsoever." And they're often surprised when I say, "Oh, good. I'm glad it's dead. Because if it's as bad as you're describing it, it needs to die." And so if you find yourself watching in that situation, we got a couple of couples here right now who were in that situation, that you know what, if you're saying right now, you know what, there's no hope, my marriage is dead, well, guess what? You're in the perfect place. Because God does his best things after things die. Just as Lazarus. His greatest miracle was after Lazarus died. Look at the greatest work of Jesus was his resurrection, which took place after he died. Remember, it is death that brings forth new life. So if you find yourself in that bad of a situation, congratulations, let the marriage die. And we're going to build it up to something new. You know, another issue that I come across when I counsel people, and I, of course, encourage them to stick their marriage out, and basically they say, "But I don't want to go back to what I just left. I don't want that." And I'll say, "Well, good. You're a fool if you do want that. Why would you possibly want to go back to that? Because I don't want you to go back to that. I want you to go back to something that is new and greater and better." So I want to encourage all those that are listening. There is hope for a greater marriage. I believe with all of my heart that God would not have ordained marriage himself if it was not going to be blessed. Remember, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 1, everything that God did, he saw that it was good. And same thing with marriage. So marriage works when it's done God's way. But why do so many marriages fail then? That's a good question. As you've heard me say many times over the years, probably, according to these statistics, 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's a staggering number. But of the remaining 50%, 50% of those, they stink. They're horrible. They're dead. They're lifeless, loveless. And the only reason why they're still together is, well, we got nowhere else to go, or we can't handle the financial strain if we separate, or we're staying in this for the kids. So that means 75% of marriages have failed in one form or another. And the question is, why have they failed, and why will they continue to fail? Well, the title of our first teaching here is Doomed Before I Do. That's the name of it, Doomed Before I Do. Because the majority of marriages or relationships that fail, whether they end in divorce or not, they're just failure, they were doomed to fail before you ever said I do. They were destined for destruction before you ever walked down that aisle. So it didn't matter how nice the ring was, didn't matter how beautiful the dress was, didn't matter how expensive the wedding ceremony was, and I had 2 kids, and they can be very expensive. Doesn't matter how nice the honeymoon was. None of that matters, because there is an explosion. There's a destruction that's just waiting to happen. And it's not if, it's when. Why? Because we bring things into our relationship that doom us to destruction. We bring them into us. You know, I remember seeing a report, this was a couple years ago, and there was a basketball player who died on the court in college. I forget if it was a practice or a game, but he died on the court. And of course, everybody's going crazy. Everybody's pointing fingers, and they're pointing fingers at the coach. They're pointing fingers at the trainers. They're pointing fingers at the school and the administration. They're pointing fingers that it was too hot in the gym. It was training too hard. You know, all these different pointing fingers and accusations that were being made. But finally, an autopsy was done, and they found out that the basketball player had an enlarged heart. He brought it with him to the team. He brought it into his practice. He brought it into his game. And the doctor said it was not a matter of if he was going to die. It was a matter of when he was going to die. Because there are things that are underneath that oftentimes we ignore. So most couples come into marriage. Yeah, and I know we go through some little tiny pre-Cana counseling and stuff like that, but unfortunately most of that's a waste of time because we don't want to deal with these issues that I'm going to bring up right now. Already there are some people that are watching this saying, I don't want to talk about this because I just want to wave the magic wand and just do a couple little things and things are going to magically get better. No, they're not. We have to deal with the things that we bring in to our relationship because most of the time those are the very things that destroy a relationship. I'll give you personal examples. My father, when he was young, his father died. Many of you know this. You've heard me share this story before. And my father was raised by a mother who was, shall we say, strange, had issues, and he was raised by a nanny and his older sister. In other words, my father never had an example of a man in his life. What hope did my father have of being a good husband and being a good father per se? And he tried his hardest, my father. He was a loving man. But what hope did he have when that was what he brought into the relationship? And my mother had it even worse. My mother was abandoned at birth and she was left in the hospital. And she bounced around from orphanage to orphanage, and she finally got put in a home with a family, and she had a foster mother, and it turned out that foster mother was the worst thing that ever happened because she got treated like Cinderella, my mother. She was never loved. She told me and my wife with tears in her eyes, I would go up to my foster mother as a young girl and try to hug her and say, I love you, and she would push me away and say, don't ever say that. You're not my daughter. You're not part of this family. Can you please tell me what chance my mother ever had of being a good mother, of knowing how to handle things? They had no chance because of what happened to them they were bringing into their marriage. Now, their marriage stayed together, but my mother became an alcoholic because her foster father was an alcoholic, and that's how they dealt with things. And it wasn't the best marriage in the world at all, obviously. But what chance did I have of being a good husband or being a good father when that was the example that was laid out before me? And my wife, she grew up in a family that was divorced when she was very, very young. That's how we started out. And if it wasn't for God's grace, I don't know where I would be or where our marriage would be right now. And that's how it was. We brought horrible things into our relationship. And that didn't mean we're horrible people. Understand, for those that are listening, and I'm going to go over some practical examples in just a little while. I'm not saying you're a bad person or a horrible person. I'm saying that there were things that were poured into you, 99% of them unintentionally, that were damaging to you. And that were little bombs that were left on the inside of you, just waiting to explode somewhere after the I-do's took place and caused destruction. I've said this many times. Damaged people damage people. Hurt people hurt people. Abused people abuse people. And our parents, as much as we may love them, they grew up in a difficult time. Like those especially that grew up in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, parents, those were crazy days. These immigrants that came in from Italy and Ireland and different countries, crazy what they went through. They weren't allowed to spend time and play catch with their kids. They had to work 24 hours a day to just survive. They were never told, I love you, by their parents, by their father. Their father cursed at them and threw things at them and called them jerks and much worse names than that. That's how they grew up because that's how their fathers grew up. There was no such thing as loving relationship, at least in the neighborhood I grew up in. That didn't exist. So we often don't have a chance of being successful because we never want to talk about and deal with the things that are on the inside of us. Why? Because we spend so much time trying to deny them. We spend so much time trying to suppress them, cover them up, and lie about them. And in a few minutes, I'm going to go over our our key verse for this teaching, and every week we're going to have a key verse for this teaching that applies to it. I'm going to go over it in just a little bit. So most couples get married, and they are following the teaching of the Beatles. Because the Beatles taught us that love is all you need. And probably there were no more false words ever spoken than those words. Because love is not all that you need. You need a whole lot more than that. I tell people, being in love with each other just gets you to the doorway to explore marriage. It should not be the determining factor of whether or not you get married. Okay, you're in love, explore marriage now. Now let's look at the whole situation. Is it healthy? I know people who, while they were dating, broke up 20 times and ended up getting married. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, they got divorced. What are you surprised about? What did you think was going to happen? There is no magic wand or magic pixie dust that changes everything. You know, there's a saying in business that past performance is the best predictor of future success. In other words, how do you know a business or a stock is going to do good? Well, how did it do last week, last month, last year? So the past often predicts the future. Well, so it is in relationships. If you're dating and you had a bad past, that's normally an indication you're going to have a bad future. Why? Because things don't just change. In fact, what people don't understand is that marriage is a magnifier. It magnifies the good, but it also magnifies the bad that's there. But we just want to ignore things and hope and cross our fingers that they're going to magically go away. And you know what? They don't. They get magnified when you get married. We ignore red flags. I was talking to a friend of mine years ago, and, you know, they got married and they got divorced, and he was telling me things that were going on a month before the wedding, and insanity was taking place. I mean, absolute crazy, insane things were taking place. And I said, well, why'd you go ahead and get married? Well, I kind of felt that I went too far. I couldn't back off now. Don't ever think that's not a good reason to ever get married. I was talking with a woman, she's probably watching right now, and she said, you know, the day of my wedding, people were telling me, you know, you can change your mind anytime you want. Because she ignored the red flags. They weren't red flags. They were nuclear bombs that were going up all around them. And she ignored them. So don't ignore those things. I often use the analogy, those orange lights or yellow lights that go off on our dashboard, they're there for a reason. They're there to tell us there's something seriously wrong on the inside of the engine. If you don't take care of it, the engine's going to blow up. So it is when warning lights or red flags go off in a relationship. They should tell us, whoa, there's something hidden deeper inside that you better address. If not, run for your life. Well, Pastor, it's too late to run now because I'm already married. We have kids. Well, there's still hope for you. But that means and that requires that there is going to be work to be done. So we bring things to the relationships that only guarantee future destruction and future loss. Now, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to look at a garden as an example, because I've always used a garden as a good example of a marriage, such as what you sow, you shall reap. Gardens are really, really good examples. And I want to talk about the first thing that you do when you start a garden. And I remember this because I couldn't wait when I moved into my house in Lincoln Park, my first house that I got. You know, and since then there's been the house down in Florida, the house down the shore, the house in France, you know, all those. But, well, you know, God's been good. The offerings have been good. No, I'm kidding. I can barely afford the house I have in Lincoln Park right now. But one of the first things I wanted to do, I wanted to plant a garden in my backyard. Probably because growing up, just up the street from me, two guys had these gardens that were like small farms. They were massive gardens. And as a kid, I couldn't wait to run to a garden and watch the tomatoes grow, or, the string beans grow, or the peppers grow, you know, or the gugoots grow out there. And that's exciting. So I wanted to start a garden. You know, it ain't easy starting a garden. Because where are you going to plant everything? In your grass in your backyard? No, the first thing you have to do is you got to dig up the old and get rid of it. And that's not easy, because those roots, even in grass, have been there a long time, and they don't want to let go. They don't want to give up. So I got myself a shovel, and I'm digging, and my back is breaking, and thank God somebody I knew what I was doing, came by with a rototiller, and they dug up the whole thing, and it saved me a lot of work. But you know what else they found when the rototiller all of a sudden is bouncing up and down like a bucking bronco? You know why? It hit a rock underneath. Another time it bounced up and down because it hit some roots, because there were trees not too far, and those roots all grow underground. Those rocks you can't see, those roots you can't see. There are thorns and thistles out of there that you can't really, or that you can see, but they get in the way. In other words, all those things have to be cleaned out. If not, you'll never successfully grow a garden. Never. You got to start with clean soil. And you know what? You never find clean soil just lying around in your backyard. You never do. Why? Because it's not natural. You don't just go outside and find good, clean, healthy soil to plant a garden or plant a seed. You don't. You have to labor at it. You have to work at it. But once you do, well, you reap all the benefits of it. So we all want some kind of good garden in our lives. And I'll give you an example. We have a picture that we're going to put up on the screen right over here. And this, for those that could see it, is right over here on my left. If you look outside, we have what we call a prayer garden. And there's a lot of nice grass, as you can see, in the front of it. But then there are trees. In the summer, there's plants, and there's a fountain out there. It's beautiful over there. I go out there and just sit there, even when there's a foot of snow. I just sit there and freeze when I'm out there, because it's a very restful, beautiful place. And we'd all want this type of garden effect in our marriage, in our family. But do you want to know what this looked like before it turned into this? Here's what it looked like before that. That's literally, no example, no exaggeration. Of course, I'm never prone to exaggeration. That's exactly what that area looked like. Go back again. That's what it turned out to be. And this is what it started as. Unfortunately, we all want the garden, but every single one of us are more like this on the inside of us. That doesn't mean you can't get the garden, because we did get the garden. You can. But we have to understand that which is on the inside of us, because life taints us. Life hurts us. Life destroys us. Life spoils us. Life does a lot of things on the inside of us, and it makes it difficult to succeed. So you can do any one of those things. In fact, you can do all of those things if you want. But, man, you got to work at it. You got to labor at it. You have to really be willing to put the time in to get the old out and the junk out, and to then bring in the new. Now, I want to go over now our key verse, our meditation verse for today, for this teaching, because it's found in Psalm 51, verse 6. And we'll put it on the screen behind me, but I'll read it right here from the Bible in front of me. Speaking of God, David says, "Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and it is in the hidden, or the inward part, where you shall make me to know wisdom." Now let's talk about that for a second. How does that apply to what I'm talking about right now? It applies to everything I'm talking about right now. Because in order to go on and be successful in what I'm talking about, in dealing with the issues that are hidden on the inside of us, we've got to be honest about it. And most of us don't want to be honest about the things that are on the inside of us and the attitudes and the issues that we bring into a relationship. We want to lie about it. It's not there. Oh, it's you. We point the finger at the other person all the time. Now, I don't want us to point the finger at anybody and play the blame game. What I'm doing right now is taking us to another level of maturity. I want us to take responsibility about what's on the inside of us that we brought in. Now, I'm not saying you're responsible for it being inside of you, because chances are you're not. Chances are you got it from your home growing up, or you got it from situations around you. It got planted on the inside of you. So I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that you brought things into a relationship that are unhealthy and deadly for a relationship. And until you are honest about it on the inside, things will never change. So right here, at the very beginning of this 8-week series, we're at a crossroad right now. Because this is the key to everything. If you could be honest, if you could look in the mirror and say, man, I got these issues. If you could look at your spouse, your husband or your wife, and say, I got to admit it, man, I got anger issues. I got to admit it, I get hot. I got to admit it, I got jealousies. And we'll talk about some of these things in just a moment. I have these issues. You're not just on step one. You've already taken the first 5 steps into getting better. You know they do the exact same thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, AA? The first thing you have to do is what? Hi, my name is Tom, and I don't really have a drinking problem. I'm just here because my wife wants me to be here right now. I'm here, but no. You're not even close. The first thing you have to do, the first step to success is, hi, I'm Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. I have to take ownership and possession of my problem, of my issues. If I don't, they will never go away. I've used this as an analogy all the time. If this microphone right here is an issue, is a problem, I can't get this out of the way until I first grab hold of it and take ownership of it. Once I grab onto it and take ownership of it, now I have the ability to move it away. If I refuse to acknowledge that that microphone is even there, or if I blame somebody else for that microphone being there, guess what? It will always be there. I have to take ownership of my issues so that now I have the power to get them out of my life. That's the first step, and this is why 75% of marriages fail right here. Because we don't want to acknowledge what's on the inside of us, or for some of us, it's so obvious what's on the inside of us that we make excuses for it and justify it on the inside. That's not good. We have to take full advantage of it. That's why our meditation verse, our key verse is that God desires truth on the inner parts of who we are. We have to be blatantly honest with ourselves and with our spouse or with our boyfriend, with our girlfriend. We have to say, man, you know, I've got issues, and this is what they are. I need help. We have to say, I can't do it on my own. That's okay. But if we lie to ourselves, and here's the funny thing. You lie to yourself, everybody else still sees it in you anyhow. You're not fooling anybody. Everybody sees your attitudes because you can't conceal them for too long. So the only person you're fooling is you. That's all you're fooling. Everybody else sees them, so you might as well acknowledge them because everybody else has already acknowledged them in your life for you. So you might as well already say, hey, you're all right. I've got these issues on the inside of me. So the first part of that verse, God desires truth on the inward part of us. If you could be honest that you've got issues on the inside of you that need to be dealt with, that are part of the cause of the problems in your marriage, then you're already several steps ahead into healing the marriage and making the marriage better. But there's a second part to that. It says this, behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part, or in the inward part, thou shalt make me to know wisdom. This is interesting. How come somebody can go for counseling 100 times and be told exactly what the problem is, exactly what they need to do, and they never seem to get it? Right? We've all talked to people, somebody we know that's got an obvious issue, and they never get it. They just go back to doing the exact same things over and over and over again. And it was like, was I talking to the wall? Did I just waste my time? Well, why does that happen? Well, notice what this verse says. God requires truth on the inward part because it's on that inward part is where he will pour out wisdom to you, knowledge, understanding to you. But if you don't have truth on the inside of you, if you have lies on the inside of you, that wisdom and that knowledge, that counsel, that understanding will be worthless. Because it has to rest, wisdom, counsel, and understanding and knowledge has to rest upon truth. Then all of a sudden, the light bulb goes on. All of a sudden, I get it. All of a sudden, I know what I have to do because it's that counsel, that guidance is resting upon truth. And now they work together. But when that counsel, that guidance is now resting upon the lie on the inside of you, you're denying that it's there, or you're blaming somebody else for your problems on the inside of you, you're going to act like, I don't get it, because that knowledge is not going to work. That wisdom is going to do nothing for you on the inside. So it requires the foundation of truth in order for something great to happen on the inside of you. So you're going to get, I promise you, a lot of great wisdom, knowledge, and truth in the next 7 weeks after this. I'm giving you the most important nugget of knowledge and truth right now. But the next 7 weeks will be ultimately a total waste of time if the knowledge and wisdom and truth I give you isn't sitting upon truth on the inside of you. If I give it to you and you're hearing it and you're still living a life of denial or lies or excuse making or finger pointing, nothing's going to change. And your spouse is going to say, you just wasted your time. Didn't you hear what the pastor said? Didn't you hear this? And they're going to be like, I didn't get it. The reason why is because your ears weren't open. Your heart wasn't open because the lie was blocking it. So you understand what I'm saying? That is super, super important. Be honest about who you are. Again, I'm not blaming you for anything. See, one reason is we're so afraid to be blamed and be responsible. That's not what this is about. This is about being accountable. And again, these things are on the inside of you because they were poured into you by other people, by your environment, by your parents. As I said earlier, our parents, my parents grew up in a horrible generation, man. They didn't know how to sow good things into their kids. They didn't know what that was because it was never sown into them. Remember this verse I've shared many times. Peter and James saw a crippled man, and he was begging for money, and they said, silver and gold have we none, but such as we have, we give to you. And there's a principle of wisdom in there. Such as we have, we give to you. I can only give to you what I have. I can't give $1 million to you. I'd love to, but I don't have $1 million, so I can only give what I got. Well, if I didn't have certain love poured into me, given to me, I can't really give that to you. If I didn't have patience put into me, taught to me, I just can't give that to you because I can only give to you what I have. So oftentimes our parents didn't have certain things. You know what our parents grew up with? Yelling and screaming all the time. That was normal. In my neighborhood, the best thing you need, for those of you who know that I have hearing aids right now, probably because when I was young, all I heard was yelling and screaming coming out of every house in the neighborhood. That was normal. That's how they communicated. And we grow up accepting that's normal. That's not normal. It may be normal, but it's not healthy. Let's put it that way. That's not good. And we'll talk about that, of course, in the future when we talk about communication. But because it was so normal to us that when we started doing it in our own relationships, what's the big deal? My parents cursed at each other, screamed at each other all the time. What's the big deal? It was never healthy. It never is healthy. Never will be healthy. But we grow up with that. So therefore, we brought into the relationship things that are unhealthy. Now, let's talk practically right now. What kinds of things do we bring into our relationships? Or I'm just going to, for lack of a better term, I'm going to write the word attitudes. What kind of attitudes, issues, do we bring into our relationships that are damning, dangerous, that ultimately lead to destruction? Well, oftentimes, and I'm going to make this the ladies' side over here and the men's side over here. Though I'm probably going to need more room to go on the back for the ladies' side. Here's something that we bring in commonly, a woman, insecurities. Now, again, I'm painting with a very broad brush. I know that. This does not apply to everybody. It definitely applies to 99.9% of the women that are in here right now. Okay? Watching. Because I know you all so well. All right? But women generally bring insecurities into relationships and therefore into marriages. And that's super unhealthy. Men value, virtue, which word should I use? Let's go with the word immaturity. Men generally bring immaturity into relationships. How many ladies could say amen? Amen. All the ladies in here said amen. And you know why? It's because it's true. They do. Again, not all. I understand that. It's true. Women bring, oftentimes, insecurities into their relationship. And it's unhealthy for a relationship. Immaturity is unhealthy for a relationship. I'll give you an example, and I've had this conversation countless times over the years with couples that are sitting in front of me. I've sat with 50-year-old couples, and you know a great thing that happens when you get older? You stop caring. You know, you realize you go, wait, I don't have time to waste by dancing around. So I used to share things with a satin soft glove. Now I've got a shotgun next to me, and now I just tell the truth to people. And oftentimes when I'm counseling with a couple, again, they could be in their 50s, I'll give them an assessment on the maturity level of their relationship. And oftentimes I'll say, you have a relationship at the level of two 13-year-olds. And that might be an insult to 13-year-olds. Because the way you act, the way you treat each other is unbelievably immature. It's tick for tat, back and forth, and poking on things and go, na, I got you. Well, I'm going to one-up you. I'm going to do this over here. What are you, 13 years old? Come on, be mature. But they're literally like two 13-year-olds in that relationship. Do you think if 13-year-olds got married, they'd have a healthy marriage, a successful marriage? No. And I don't care. You could have a master's degree. You could have a doctorate and still have a marriage on the level of a 13-year-old. And how do you judge the maturity level of a relationship? Simple. What are your reactions to things? Reactions tell the truer story of who you really are than your actions. Oh, actions speak louder than words. I agree. Reactions scream a whole lot louder than actions. You know why? Because you could plan an action. Oh, I'm going to take my wife on a beautiful date. I'm going to book a nice restaurant. I'm going to buy her flowers. I'm going to do this. I'm going to rent a limo. I'm going to take a shower for the first time this week. I'm going to, shave. And, well, it's easy to plan in advance an action. And it's easy to plan to be on your best behavior. Now, I'm not taking away the importance of those actions. We're going to talk about that in the future. But you know what you can't plan in advance? A reaction. Because it comes like that. And the Bible says, from the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks. Or how you react to a situation determines what's really on the inside of you and will often determine the maturity level of you and your marriage. Is your reaction, I'm going to get you back? Is your reaction, you said this about me? Well, I'm going to say this about you. You know, when I'm counseling people, which I do quite often, this happens all the time. They try to deflect. So I'll ask the wife, let's just say, well, what's the issue that has you so upset and so bothered? And she'll bring up the issue. And what's the husband going to do? Well, I'm going to take my gun out and I'm going to fire back 4 things I got against you. And then she's, of course, takes the whole bucket and dumps the whole thing on him, and it's like, we got nowhere. So here's what I do now. When she brings up that issue with him, the minute he starts responding back with his issues against her, I say, stop right there. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about what she brought up about you that bothers her. But she does this. I don't care what she does. That's not what we're talking about this second. In the future, we could talk about that. But right now, we're going to address what she just said. And that's important because most of the time we never get to the issues of the problem. We never talk about them. Because all we want is to just, blow each other up in the conversation. And we have, again, a 13-year-old, 12-year-old, 11-year-old level of maturity in our relationship. Because we react not like adults. We don't sit down and say, well, tell me, dear, what's bothering you right now? What did I do that's bothering you right now, sweetheart? Please tell me. We don't do that. We just try to hide, try to avoid it, try to deny it, try to make excuses, try to deflect, try to blame somebody else. So that's how you could determine the maturity level of your relationship. How you react or respond when something happens to you that's uncomfortable or you don't like. If you can handle it in a mature way, guess what? You're an adult. And chances are, you're probably doing pretty good in your marriage. But if you don't respond well to that, then you're probably on a 13, 12, 11-year-old maturity level in your relationship. And that needs to change. And we'll talk about some of those things. But oftentimes, our insecurities forbid us from being honest and talking about issues. Because I'm so insecure about it that I get angry, I get upset, I get nervous, I'm afraid that all bad things are going to happen right now, so I have to cover it up or change it. No, insecurities, we need to change that. And guys, we got to grow up overall in relationships. We have to. Oftentimes guys get married and they want to act the same way they did before they got married after they're married. Oh, no, I can't do it. I got to be with my buddies. You're married now. Act like it. Grow up. But you want to, I'm going to be honest with you right now. You want to know the reason why so many men are immature? Because of women. What do you mean, women? You're blaming women? Yeah, I am. Because of their mothers. Their mothers are the ones who baby them and spoil them. Oh, my little Johnny. Oh, you're so beautiful. Your little Johnny's 32 right now. Treat him like he's 32 right now. Oh, yeah, I'll do this for you. I'll do that for you. I'll make dinner for you. I'll wash your clothes for you. I'll iron your underwear for you. Does anybody actually iron underwear? I don't know. Probably Lisa. Lisa, you'd be the only one I can think of right now who had a possibility off of that over there. Your son's 45. He doesn't need you to iron his underwear for him. Okay? So, and I'm going to tell you this cycle because I've seen this. I have seen this. I've documented it. What happens? Husband and wife have a poor marriage, poor relationship. So the relationship between the husband and wife becomes cold. So what does the wife do? She pours all of her attention and love and affection to her son. And now she's pouring everything into him, and now she's only guaranteeing that she's going to raise a future bad husband because he's spoiled rotten right now because you do everything for him. You let him get away with everything. How many of us knew a mother that I call her last name was not my Johnny? Your Johnny's the biggest troublemaker in the world. Not my Johnny. My Johnny would never do. I got news for you. Johnny belongs in prison, and he's only 4 years old. But because you spoil him all the time, so I'm totally serious when I'm joking, but I'm totally serious when I say this. A lot of men are immature because mommies dominated their lives and didn't allow daddy to turn him into a man, treat him like a man. So therefore, Johnny's immature, and he's immature in the relationship. Johnny wants to stay up late at night playing Xbox for all kinds of hours, as though that's what an adult should do. I'm sorry, that's not what an adult should do. I'm not saying you can't play Xbox a little bit throughout the day. But Johnny wants to play for hours and hours and hours and ignore his responsibilities towards his wife and children and his home Johnny wants to spend all kinds of money on Xbox and videos and games that they don't have. Johnny is immature. And we bring that into, and when that happens, your marriage has no chance of being happy and successful. It doesn't. So insecurities that we bring into a relationship, usually women, could be men, and immaturity is not good, is unhealthy. But let's go down a little bit. Out of insecurities, they bring jealousies. And again, men or women, a healthy relationship could never be one that's based upon jealousies. Never. Now, I use this analogy all the time. I use this as an example all the time. One of the greatest signs of a bad or unhealthy relationship, which is oftentimes based upon insecurities or jealousies or something like that, is if you feel like you have to constantly walk on ice or on eggshells. I can't be honest. I'm forced to lie, because if I tell the truth, I know it's going to happen. There's going to be an explosion. There's going to be a fight. Oh, I can't say that? Well, if I say that, you don't know what's going to happen to her. Boom! Mount Helen is going to erupt. Are there any Helens under the age of 60 right now, by the way, now I think about it, in the world today? Mount Ethel is going to erupt. That's not healthy. That means we're walking on eggshells, and we can't have any communication that's healthy because there's jealousies and insecurities that are in the way. Unhealthy in a relationship. Oftentimes men are selfish because they're immature. They're very selfish. It's all about me. It's all about what I want. It's all about what makes me happy. And when you're married, the minute you get married, it's no longer about you. It's about us and about my spouse, about my husband or about my wife. It's about them. And then the minute you have children, guess what? It becomes even more or less about you, because now you got to worry about your children. But we're going to talk about that mistake that is made in the future too, where we neglect our marriage on behalf of our children. And that's unhealthy, very wrong and very unhealthy. But oftentimes, because men are immature, they're selfish on things. And they don't think about her feelings, or they don't think about the big picture. They just want to do what I want to do. Honey, where are you going? Oh, I'm going fishing. It's our anniversary. Oh, well, I'll catch you a fish and we'll make it for dinner. And he convinces himself, oh, what a great guy I am. I'm going to catch a fish for my wife for our anniversary. Now you're being immature and selfish. Here, that's ironic. I didn't realize the word fish was in over there. That's just a coincidence, huh? And that's not healthy at all, because we're not thinking about, I'm only thinking about myself. Another one on the other side of the coin over here. How about being argumentative? Okay. Notice I put this on the woman's side of the ledger over here. Now, why would I do that? Because it's true. I'm not saying that men can't argue too. Not saying that. But overall, women are far more argumentative than men, overall. Because I'm going to tell you what happens. Men, well, let's just say the wife is home taking care of the kids or something, and the husband's at work. And they had a little issue the night before. All the next day, the wife is thinking, what I'm going to say to him the minute he walks in that door. The whole day, you know what the husband's thinking? How do I avoid going home so I don't hear what she has to say to me the minute I walk in the door? She can't wait to get back into the fight. He can't wait to find a way to avoid the fight. And she's ready. She'll take on Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson will be afraid to come home out of that situation. And here's what happens. Women could reload in an argument 10 times a day, consecutively, until they get their way. We'll talk about that in just a second. Men will argue a little bit. You know what they'll do? they'll check out. I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'm not going to fight about it anymore. I don't want to hear it from you anymore. So he's checked out. Now she finds something else to argue with him about, because it's the original problem. Now it's the fact he won't talk to her about it at all. Now she's arguing with him about that, and that makes him check out even more, and then you have this big gulf that goes up between the two of you. Well, we bring that attitude into our marriage because we're argumentative. We were argumentative before we got married, and that's unhealthy. And again, we ignore those red flags. Almost done. Because we're immature and selfish, we often have a lack of responsibility. On the men's side of the ledger over here. Again, men are often like children. Men are often the most irresponsible people on the face of the earth. Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll take the garbage out. I'll get to it. The garbage is now a small mountain that has been in their kitchen for 3 weeks now. I said I'll get to it. You do realize you said that 3 weeks ago. And I've added 40 more garbage bags to the pile in those 3 weeks. Now, I don't know about you guys. This just may be in the Berninger household here. You know how Jesus multiplied fish and bread? My wife has the gift to multiply garbage bags in our house. I don't know why God gave her that gift, but I could take a garbage bag out, come back up the stairs, and there's 3 more full garbage bags there. I don't know how she does it. I swear she's going to the neighbor's house and collecting garbage, shoving them in the bag just to put them in the kitchen in front of me so I take those out. She multiplies garbage unbelievably. And again, I've got no problem with, hon, could you take the garbage out? All right. I mean, you have to jump up and do it right then and right there because, I'm going to go downstairs later. I'll take the garbage with me. I got no problem with that. It's when 3 weeks go by. Or when your wife puts it right in front of the door. Yeah, I'm talking about you right now that are watching on TV. I'm talking about you right now. You know who you are. She puts it right in front of the door, and you go like this. Open the door, walk out, and say, I didn't even see it there. It was there? How could you miss it? You actually got a step ladder to climb up and go over it and go down the other side, and you missed the garbage? That's impossible. I swear, I didn't even see it. I didn't realize it was there. My mind was lost. Lack of responsibility. But lack of responsibility in planning things and planning for the future and doing certain things. Men are often, because of their immaturity, irresponsible. And that's something that could change. That's something that needs to change. And last thing, I'll put it on this side. Controlling. How many of us have learned that wives know how to do everything better than their husbands, and it has to be done at the exact moment they say it has to be done, the exact way it has to be done, in the flavor, the style, the color, the fashion of how they want it done? I have yet to meet the woman who doesn't know how to do everything better than her husband. I've yet to meet her. And trust me, from a man's point of view, not good. Now, I'll give you my example that my wife's heard 100 times over here, and somehow she still puts up with me. But most of you, if you heard this before, because this is the difference between a husband and a wife. My wife and I are making a cake in the shape of the United States, because it was for a project for my daughter. We had to make a map of the United States, and so generally I'm the more creative one in the marriage. So I said, how about we make a cake, a sheet cake, and cut it in the shape of the United States? She can bring it to class, and that's a guaranteed A. I mean, come on. If I was a teacher, I'd give you an A+ for the whole year just on one sheet cake. So Lord helps us make the sheet cake, but now we're decorating the sheet cake. And my wife and I are standing next to each other, and so she's here, I'm here. She's putting in the Mississippi River with some icing. I'm working on Florida over here, putting things around here. And I'm going to tell you exactly the difference between the man and the woman. Here's me working on Florida. Here's my wife working on the Mississippi. Why are you doing it like that? I think you should do it this way. No. It'll look better if it goes this way. That's the difference. I'm like, I finally take my things and I go, here, you do the whole thing. Why? Ready for this? I'm only trying to help. I go, no, you're not. You're trying to control the situation. You want it done your way. And there have been many times I've told my wife, if I want help, I'll ask for it. If not, leave me alone. I say, now if you go outside and see me hanging off the gutter and the ladder fell, guess what? I need help. Don't even hesitate. Jump up and lift that ladder up to save me. That's no problem. But if you're standing here like this watching me paint and shaking your head with that look, no. Hon, what are you doing? The strokes are going all the wrong direction over here. I'm going to be able to see those brush strokes over here. Do it this way. Remember? Wax on and wax off, paint on, paint. Stop. Because I'm just going to give you the brush and the can of paint. You can do the whole thing yourself. So women tend to be a little controlling on situations. And that doesn't bode well for a successful marriage. Now, again, if a woman asks the husband to do something that's necessary to get done, such as take the garbage out, he needs to get it out within the next couple hours. I completely agree with that. If 48 hours go by or 72 hours go by or 6 months go by, that garbage is still there, she's not being controlling. She's just asking for help, and now she's, you're acting immature, and now you're making her to be the bad guy because of your immaturity. But ladies, stop being controlling on the situation. Your way is not the only way, and it's not necessarily the best way. And if it's the guy who's controlling on things, stop being so controlling on things. Try to work together with it. Find that healthy balance. But these are all things, all these things, and 100 more, we bring into the relationship. We bring those attitudes into the relationship. And they only guarantee destruction and explosion that's going to come. So what I want to encourage you to do, your homework assignment for today, is to look in the mirror and make a list of things that are unhealthy, that are on the inside of me, inside of you, that you brought into the relationship. Admit, say, man, I got a jealousy problem, husband or wife. Admit I got anger issues. Admit I fight all too often. Admit I got a short temper and it's not good. Admit that, yeah, I've been immature and selfish. Admit that and make a little list. And then ask your spouse, what do you think the issues are that I brought into the relationship? And compare notes. Because I promise you, they see more than you do, and you see more than they do about themselves. And in a mature relationship, you'll be able to have that conversation. If you can't have that conversation for 1 minute and it breaks out into a fight, well, guess what? You're probably down to an 8-year-old relationship right there. You should be able to talk about, well, here's the things that I see in you. My wife, I value her opinion more than anybody else on the face of the earth. There are no 10 people that could say something to me that supersedes just my wife saying something to me. Nobody. It's when my wife says something that I take that more important than anything else. I value what she says to me. Why? Because we're partners. She's my teammate. And she has my best interest in heart, and I've got her best interest in heart. So if I say something to her that's not flattering, it's because I love her and I love us, and I want it to help our relationship. But if I'm at the point where I say something to her to just hurt her, then there's the problem with immaturity in the relationship and immaturity in myself. And that needs to change. So I value and trust in my wife. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't always like everything she might say. Because I can be just as insecure about things as anybody else on the face of the earth. I always want to hear good things. So I may not like some of the things she has to say. But you know what? I'll think about it, and I'll eventually swallow it. Oh, I may argue with her on it and defend my point, but I never, ever, ever dismiss out of hand what she has to say. Ever. Because my wife has wisdom. And my wife is a goodly, godly woman. And if she says something that she sees or she thinks, it's for a reason, and the reason is for our betterment, never to damage and hurt us. So I will consider it, and she's right a lot of times about what she has to say. So I encourage you, examine yourself, your homework, each of you, husband, wife, and then later on, maybe 15 minutes later or the next day, compare notes and say, what do you think? So again, I'll close with this. If your relationship is dead or dying, that's okay. God raises the dead and does something newer and greater and better than has ever been done before. Deal with these issues, because if you don't get these issues out, anything that happens after this is just wasting your time. God desires truth on the inward parts. Now, before I close or end, at the end of this, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see a slide that's going to come up after this that will say if you want to contact Pastor Tom, you could send a text to him or an email to him or some kind of electronic communication. Go right ahead. It's an email. Go right ahead and send it. And if it's a question or a comment, next week I'll bring it up at the start of our teaching and try to answer it as best I can. Okay? God bless everybody. I love you. I'll see you next week at 7:30. Bye-bye.